name plaque right there. We will start our next section with Kirk McLean here from Buffalo, and Sam will be getting here any minute, but we want to keep the proceedings going. So Ari Epstein is going to moderate, I think, for this session, and we're just going to start. Okay, this is it. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, everyone. We're really excited to. Thank you. We're really excited to have this panel assembled today. What inspired us, basically, we had these folks together at the Upstate Data Summit in Syracuse in June, and we were blown away by what Syracuse, Buffalo, and Rochester are doing. And those are the 3 cities right now in upstate New York that are collaborating with Bloomberg Philanthropies' What Works Cities initiative. They've all stood up organizations called innovation teams, reporting to the mayor, who basically do process improvement combined with data-driven government initiatives. There's a continuation of the thread we're having in this conversation in the data track for the remainder of the day. If you are a city or town government with a population over 30,000, I strongly encourage you, especially to attend the What Works Cities workshop, but it is designed for anybody in local government. So I will introduce our panelists. I'm going to invite Adria to come up here. Adria Finch is also joining our panel from Syracuse. So we have Kirk McLean, who is the director of Open Buffalo? Open Data Buffalo. Buffalo's Open Data program. He's also the chair of the Open Data Governance Committee at the City of Buffalo, and has been shepherding Buffalo's implementation of an open data program. We're going to talk about what that entails. Adria Finch is the director of the Office of Innovation at Syracuse, who is, we've asked to come in at the last moment. So the Office of Innovation includes the Chief Data Officer, Sam Edelstein, who will be joining us in a few minutes. So they work very closely together. And I guess we will go ahead and kick off the panel. I have a series of questions that I thought we could go through, and then that'll leave time for us to have questions from the audience with the remainder of the panel. Oh yeah, I should probably say who I am. I am a special assistant in the Office of Local Government, working with Mark Pattison and the divisions under the Office of Local Government. I work on data-driven government initiatives, so in-house, improving our data resources so that we can get better information about our outcomes and operations and services that we provide for local governments. I am also responsible for our initiatives and outreach to promote data-driven government initiatives all over the state, including one of the initiatives that we administer under a grant with the town of Fishkill, that I should give a shout out, and Bob Alcala is here from Supervisor Town of Fishkill. If any of you are trying to get better data about your highway program specifically, Fishkill has procured a system that is allowing them to use standard codes and get comparable data on highway costs at an operational level among several municipalities in Dutchess County, with an eye towards wider use across the state. All right, so we can kick off our. Here's Sam. Hey.
Hey.
All right.
I'm good, thank you.
So Sam is also in the Office of Innovation in Syracuse. He is the Chief Data Officer. All right, so if we're ready, we'll kick the panel off with, and we'll start with Adria, okay?
Okay.
Right to left. So what are your mayor's top priority? Oh, sorry. Sorry. Adria, what are your mayor's top priorities?
Actually, our mayor started in January this year, and we went through a visioning process with him where we identified 4 specific objectives that now we're measuring with data. And those are to achieve fiscal sustainability, to improve and stabilize neighborhoods, is my microphone not on? Am I just not close enough? Okay. So we're looking for to achieve fiscal sustainability, improve neighborhoods, and then additionally, we are trying to improve constituent engagement and response, and then provide better services. And we are using this framework that we call, or that's called objectives and key results, to measure the progress associated towards all of those. So we have specific kind of sub goals or key results that those are the actual measurable things and metrics push into. The metrics push into them. Did I lose my sound again? There we go. Each week we have a meeting where we review, during our department head meetings, where we review the progress towards.
Well,
Really close to see if that works. Or maybe that works, right?
yeah.
Project.
Hello. Okay. So our mayor has the 4 main things that he's looking to achieve right now, and I am probably going to let Sam talk a little bit more specifically about how the measurement is being tracked for that, but we went through a specific visioning process to identify those 4 goals.
And same question to Kirk about Buffalo.
Is my microphone working? No.
Yeah, just pass them.
Okay. One of our mayor's top goals, we're a very diverse community, so he wants to ensure opportunity for all. We're a major refugee resettlement area. The zip code I live in, I think there's like 60 different languages spoken. So we want to ensure opportunity for all, especially with increasing technology, making sure we're not leaving people on the other side of the digital divide. And that goes along with increasing government efficiency and how we're doing that through technology. We also have a target of increasing our fiscal strength, how are we better tracking revenues, better making sure that the monies we're billing to everyone are adequately captured. We want to enhance public safety and increase economic development, which I think is not a unique to local government.
So continuing on that thread, Kirk, what are some programs, services and programs that come to mind when you consider these priorities?
So in terms of ensuring opportunity for all, especially with technology in mind, we are launching free Wi-Fi in underserved areas of the city. We've got a corridor on the city's east side, which is predominantly African American, where we've launched free Wi-Fi along the entire street, the central business district corridor in that community. We are also, in collaboration with New York State, redeveloping a old manufacturing site, a brownfield. It's called the Northland Corridor Redevelopment Project. And what we're doing is not only building up that site for jobs of the future, but also baking in a workforce training center into that building, and then improving the neighborhoods around. So people are going to start being trained on advanced manufacturing, clean energy jobs. There's also going to be a coding school within the workforce training center. and the goal is to get people from that community in the door, being trained and working those jobs at the facility. One of the big things that I'm working on is a Data 101 initiative. So we've launched the Open Data Portal. But what does that mean to constituents that might not understand what an open data portal is? What is data? What is open data? Why is this important to me? So we launched a program to get regular active citizens, block club leaders, into a computer lab and teaching them how to engage with the portal and leverage the data to think about their communities and think about how they can improve their communities and gain a better understanding of what's going around them with data.
And same question for Sam. What services and programs come to mind when you think of your mayor's top priorities?
Sure. So first, just wanted to get a sense. I know that there are a lot of cities here and towns here that are a variety of sizes, a variety of maturities when it comes to using data and technology and some of their practices. So are there people in here, other cities who have open data portals? Does that make sense when we talk about open data, what that means? So kind of no. So maybe it makes sense to set the stage when we talk about some of these things, how we think about that. So we believe one of the mayor's major priorities is to have accountability and transparency in the way that we do our work. We know that there are a lot of different services that we provide. Generally, our residents have some sense of today the snowplows are obviously out and about. They think that we do a good or bad job on clearing the roads, you know, based on sort of their own perception. We also collect a lot of data on what that means. How quickly are we clearing roads? How many complaints are we getting about where those roads are being cleared? Are those complaints coming equitably? Does that mean that if a neighborhood is complaining a lot about not having clear roads, that they aren't being served well, or is it just that they complain a lot more than the rest of the city? We think it's important to make all that data really publicly available so that we can show kind of how we're interpreting the services that we need to provide at the same time as what residents are doing. And so when Kirk talks about open data, when we talk about open data, that means allowing the data that we generally have in our systems that you know, we may look through spreadsheets and things like that. It's including the public in that as well. Now, what we've tried to do to step that up additionally is, as Adria was talking about, is to start running performance management meetings, which essentially we've tried to understand through what our departments care about and then also what our community cares about. Where do we need to really target to deliver the best services that we can? So whether we're talking about being fiscally responsible with our budgets, we are a typical upstate city that has a really, really tight budget and more services that we need to provide than we can afford. We think it's important to be tracking how much money we're spending and figuring out where are we consistently struggling with meeting our goals and where do we sometimes not spend all of the budget that we could be, and how can we repurpose those things? How can we be responsible? Additionally, saying we're also going to let you see how much we've budgeted to spend and how much we've actually spent. So if you'd like to check and follow along, you can. And then just as an addition on that, knowing that not everybody loves to get into an Excel spreadsheet and actually analyze it, we make a dashboard publicly available as well so that people can see, okay, you have spent X% of the budgeted dollars that you have. And so that's just one way that we do these things. Ultimately, that all comes back to the fact that we have a city that is, recent census data showed that we're the 9th most impoverished city in the country. We know that only about half of our residents have access to broadband and a computer in their home, which, to Kirk's point about digital divide, I have three kids, and 2 of them are in school now, and they get homework that they have to do on the internet. So if you don't have internet in your house, that's a big problem, not just because we want people to be able to watch Netflix or to be able to browse the internet, but because that's how they get their education. And so looking through that data, making it publicly available, helping people to understand it, all is really important. We think that there's a huge opportunity for using data and technology to bridge that gap, but also to be able to target it on where the major problems are so that we can focus on them and spend dollars appropriately.
Thank you, Sam. Adria, would you add any other service areas that come to mind for your mayor's top priorities?
Well, so the way our office really works right now is, so my office, we still follow, we're a Bloomberg innovation team. So we're still following the Bloomberg philosophy, which is to have one priority area that we look at a year. And so my office is focused more on design and process-based innovation, or my staff within the office. And then Sam and his staff focus more on the data and technology-based innovation. And so one of the things that we're focusing on right now, the mayor's priority, is housing stability. And how do you reduce transiency? How do you ensure that people can live in the same house, for a few years rather than moving multiple times a year, just to add a layer of stability to help, kids in school, to help people find jobs, to deal with transportation-related issues. So that's just another priority that we're focusing on right now.
And what does housing stability touch on? Like, what are some programs, departments that are
Sure.
leads in that effort?
Yeah, we, so with internal departments, we're working quite a bit with code enforcement, and then also our Department of Neighborhood Development, and our law department. Code enforcement, really, we're trying to ensure that the houses are safe and quality so that people can live there as long as possible. With our neighborhood development program, we're working on some eviction prevention programs. And then with our law department, we're also partnering to try to change some local policies related to eviction, which basically means going and lobbying some of the judges to make changes to their procedures. So they've been a great department to work with as well.
So, question for Kirk. In your opinion, what are some of the steps you think need to be taken in order to, I'm going to start with a goal of underserved areas, to address their needs, in specific areas of operation. So like, what departments need to accomplish what in order to fulfill that goal?
So one of the big things I'm focused on right now, as I helped launch the open data portal from the mayor's office, they saw a need that the IT department needed some help. So they brought in a new CIO and pulled me up into the IT department to help with the city's digital transformation efforts. So we're in an effort to provide more efficient services to all residents of the city. So we're looking at all aspects of IT. What softwares can we procure that can be easier to use for people that aren't super technologically savvy. We just launched a new website pretty much concurrently with our new open data portal. We're looking at a new payment portal to make it easier for people to interact with the city and then pay their property taxes, and generally thinking about how we can change how we people interact with the city. Can that be done in more efficient ways? Can we provide resources to people in a way that's easier for them to consume?
Thanks. And Sam, you had mentioned accountability, particularly around, I know finances has been a big topic in Syracuse. So what are steps you think need to be taken in order to achieve the mayor's vision for financial accountability?
So I think, generally, probably a little bit higher level than the question that you asked specifically, but then I can get to that too. Generally, I think the way that we are trying to approach things and the way that Adrian and I work together on a lot of these projects is thinking about understanding what our residents need, and a lot of times that has nothing to do with data. It has to do with talking to people and observing where things go. And so I think for everybody in this room, that's something. You don't need a chief data officer, you don't need a chief innovation officer, you don't need Bloomberg dollars to make that happen. You can go and set up times to think about how you get real responses from a variety of diverse opinions in the city about what needs to happen first. Because if we're thinking about what fiscal decisions we're making, we can't do that in a bubble. We need to think about how we engage the community to learn about what those priorities should be and how we should be looking at them. Secondly, I think we do have a lot of data that we can analyze and think about where do we need to spend more or less, and what it means if we're spending less, or what it means if we're bonding for something specifically. I think when Adrian and I try to tackle a problem, what we'll often do is say, okay, we understand that in our city there are a lot of sewer backups. People call and say, their basement's overflowed because a sewer is backed up, which is problematic. It can be costly. It can be really gross. And so, but it's something that is also resource intensive for us. We have to send a crew out to go and clear out the sewer, those kind of things. We can use data to figure out who's calling us the most and where is this happening consistently over time. And we may get sort of targeted in an area, but then we need to figure out how do we talk to people about how they could resolve that issue in a different way. So in some cases, it may be that people are flushing things down the toilet that don't belong down the toilet. In other cases, there may be issues with the sort of the municipal sewer system that need to be paid attention to. So what my side of the office does is sort of give that information to the departments, and then also Adria will take that and then can say, okay, how do we go and communicate with folks specifically that can sort of target their specific needs? And so that may be redesigning a form that we've historically given out, or thinking about who can go and talk to different people, or what community meetings can we go to. We also have a large refugee community where they have different, they haven't necessarily lived in a place with a sewer system like ours, and so educating them about what things can be flushed down the toilet. And so I think that's like a very practical use. None of it needs a ton of data. It doesn't need sensors all over the place that tell you what's going on. So I think it's all, something that any town in New York State could tackle, but it's sort of a combination between the two pieces of looking at data and information that you have in a variety of ways about where a specific issue is coming up that can be challenging, that can be negative for residents themselves, but then also challenging for the crews that have to consistently go out and resolve it. And then also thinking about how do we change this? And that isn't necessarily putting out a press release. It isn't necessarily just sort of throwing your hands up in disgust. It's thinking about how do you redesign forms, or how do you talk to people differently. And I think that all sort of rolls back into also how are we defining our fiscal priorities so that we're addressing things well, and again, being open and accountable to the people who put us in our jobs, so that we can, we can make sure that they understand the decisions that we're making. I'm wondering if we can apply that to one of the specific priorities. I think maybe housing stability being the chief one. What do those steps look like around housing stability? Or is there you've been in operation since 2016? The office, 2015.
2015.
Mm-hmm.
So you've had some time to develop models. So
Sure.
So what is the model you're looking to apply to that problem looking like? And if you think Adria will
Yeah, we can probably tag team on this a little bit. So again, I mean, we have similar challenges to any other upstate city or town when it comes to housing stability. We have a housing stock that's, you know, generally pretty old. There's a lot of vacancy. I think we have about 1,700 vacant properties out of the 40,000 citywide, so around 5% of our housing stock is vacant. There's a lot of not so great rental properties where you know, people really are getting taken advantage of, and so that can all cause a problem. What we try to do is look at okay, where are code violations? So we all have codes departments, and we look at where are code violations, but not just where are code violations, but where are the code violations that are most critical for someone being able to sort of sustain and live a healthy life. So we probably don't like that paint is chipping on the outside of a house and it makes it sort of look ugly, or maybe that there's a hole in the wall. Again, not great for sort of things being nice inside, but ultimately, more importantly, we don't want lead on some, you know, chipping lead paint on the inside where a kid can be poisoned by lead. We have a large blood lead problem in the city. We don't want mold to be growing in the house. Those kind of things that directly affect someone's health are the critical things. So being able to dive into the data that we have to figure out where are those things most problematic, where there are landlords that are continuously finding those problems happening, so that we can, you know, target the frequent flyers, as we call them. Those kind of things, I think, are at least one of the first steps in sort of understanding what is the level of problem that we're dealing with here. And then Adria, I guess.
Yeah, so what we really try to do is implement data-driven innovation. And so what that does is, you know, Sam already talked about kind of these high-level data audits that start when we take over a project or we step in, where first we just have to figure out like what data exists. And that can be a huge lift in and of itself. When, not to change conversations, but when we were working on infrastructure, for example, we had tons of meetings and asked everybody at DPW and water and engineering, do you have any data? And 7 months later, DPW like casually mentioned that they had this spreadsheet, this giant spreadsheet that had all of the road ratings and road attributes associated to it that they had never shared with us. And we're like, but that's data. So just trying to make the people that you're working with understand and the stakeholders understand what is the data, and then you can get it, and then you can do these sometimes quick and dirty analyses just to see if there are any patterns that exist. Sometimes they're longer, more intensive geospatial analyses, but or other type of investigations just to really understand what the root causes of challenges are. Once you have those kind of root causes or those you know, really underlying issues established, that's when we come in and we do some idea generation around that. And for some of these bigger projects like housing stability, it's a longer, intensive, community-driven process where we're going out and we're using human-centered design elements to really probe and get people to come up with creative ideas to solve problems. We've actually pivoted our methodology over the years, and I think it's something that we're continuing to innovate on in our office in and of itself. But then also with smaller-based projects now, sometimes, especially with our performance office, if we're looking in this neighborhood-related thing, which priority, which still ties back to housing stability, we'll be able just to see like, oh look, like let's pull some data and just look at, I don't know, the inspectors who are doing code enforcement and why are some inspectors perhaps performing better over others, and then we can innovate around that. Like, and it doesn't have to be something big. Maybe it's just a little, you know, you give an inspector a list of when they have things due, which doesn't sound big and sexy, but makes a big impact. So just generating all of those ideas. What kind of, you know, simple like lean type of procedures can we put in place or operate? Sometimes like organizing your office and cleaning things up makes a huge difference. So no, for real. You know, I don't want to like throw ourselves, you know, down a hole, but sometimes, especially for permits, for example, they just did this. We're shouting this, they clean their office and they organize their office. And so now when people come in to pick up their permits, they know where those permits are, which is a big deal for us. It's going to save, you know, tens of thousands of dollars in staff time throughout the year. So anyway, any idea is a good idea, and we just encourage people to really look at those. For the bigger ideas, then there's kind of a project planning phase or an implementation planning phase where you figure out, okay, we want to develop a rent escrow account program to help with housing stability issues. How do we do that? There's a bunch of legal hurdles that you have to do, and you just plan the whole thing out and manage the heck out of it. I think Sam and I are both, we've been able to hire some great staff, and what we've come to realize is sometimes it's not necessarily the credentials or the background that you need. You just need a really good employee who can get stuff done, who can manage a project, who can work with others. And that's now what we really look for in an employee, like who can just get stuff done. And then, you know, then we implement, and we then bring the data back in, and we measure the progress. And with our continuous performance meetings that we're having, we see what's working, what's not working. And by having these meetings once a month for each kind of topic that we're having, we're able to be agile. We're able to increase accountability, because actually these are happening during department head meetings. So, you know, one department head is standing up in front of their peers and saying, oh, we're doing this, and this will be implemented by next month. So if they come back in, you know, December, and the office isn't organized, even though they promised it, they said that in front of all their peers, the other, you know, department heads, senior staff, mayor. And so it's just this cycle of data and then innovation.
Does anyone else do anything like that? Performance management meetings? Albany? Okay. Do you all have a sense of what that means? Sorry. Do you, when we're talking about this, do you all have a sense of what that means? If you raise your hand or something. Yeah, performance management generally, and sort of the process that we're doing. So sort of. Okay. Would it be helpful to talk about that more specifically? Do people care? Maybe? Yes. Okay. Okay. I mean, so we've very publicly, I think, sort of set these expectations. So about this is the goal that we're getting to. So an objective is that we are delivering services equitably, efficiently, and across the city. And then there are specific sort of, we call them key results that fall under those things. And so there's a lot when you say deliver services equitably and efficiently, that could be a ton of things. But we've chosen a couple of different ways to measure that and sort of decide that will say that we've met that objective. And so one of those things may be that we will fill potholes within 5 days after they've been complained about. Or that we will send an inspector out to go and inspect whatever kind of perceived violation within 48 hours after it's been reported. We then take that data every single week and we look at it and we say, you know, potholes haven't been filled within 5 days. That's not, there are reasons why, like today, they aren't going to be filling potholes. So someone may have seen a pothole yesterday, they complain about it. You know, over the next week, I don't think that we're gonna have a lot of pothole filling opportunities, and so we likely won't meet the goal of filling that specific pothole within 5 days. I think we think that that's okay, but we also think that we should be honest about why that's happened or why it hasn't happened. And so we will sort of compile all of that data and say, well, over the past year, we've filled 70% of our potholes within 5 days. We would like it to be 95%, and so we aren't there yet. And so our Commissioner of Public Works talks about that. We don't yell at him. We just sort of say, you know, what's going on? Where are there ways to improve? A lot of times it means that there needs to be partnership with other departments, so it sort of creates an opportunity to have discussions where other departments will say, you know, we go and do blah, 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 and so that could help here. And then Public Works says, great, because this is really hard to do, so we can use any of the help that we have. Sometimes it means that we say, well, we need to find a new technology or a new approach to filling potholes because we can't do them in the winter, but we really should be. And so maybe that means that we use different kind of asphalt or those kind of things that are outside of my realm of knowing what the heck I'm talking about. But so that way then we can revisit those things constantly, and then they can say, you know, we can't, like, we need to hire more people. We have done everything that we can, and the only way that we can do this is hiring more people. And then at least we can go back to specific data and say, yeah, that probably is legitimate because it seems like you've done all that you can do, or you haven't done all of these next steps. So before we get to the additional hiring or buying a brand new, you know, whatever, $250,000 truck that's going to do these things, let's do the other things first that are hopefully cheaper, hopefully faster. And so that's essentially it. We have some tech stuff on the back end that brings in a lot of data, and you know, you don't have to do that, but we could certainly talk through some of those things. But that's the overall vision: is we're setting expectations, we're reviewing them, we're doing it in a collaborative way so people don't feel threatened, but then we also are having the expectation that the community will see it. And so that's sort of the like potential for getting yelled at part. So I think that's where we try to have a full circle of it, and then that also then brings in you know, our approaches of if you need to think differently, then that will require some new methods of thinking about the problem. And so Adria will think about that, or I'll, you know, my office will do analysis on where are there bottlenecks or those kind of things that we can help. So hopefully that helps to give some context about what we're talking about with these things. Sorry to get us off track.
Well, that makes me wonder, this is probably a culture change within the city. And you know, just saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because if you're considering bringing in new data to support a change decision, what are some of the things? Well, what are some of the things that worked? Mm-hmm. Also, feel free to discuss some of the things that didn't work.
Sure. So this is not the first iteration of a performance management office for the city of Syracuse. In a previous administration that was a long time ago, there was another performance management office that I think probably worked well for what it was doing, but the challenges that we heard, some of the staff that works for the city were still around when that first iteration came through. They talked about how they felt like they were in the hot seat, and people would say, you know, would get mad at them if the potholes weren't filled within 5 days. And it wasn't a productive discussion. It was like, you're going to be sitting there and I'm going to yell at you about and ask you why you haven't done that. So that was difficult for people to sort of get on board with. The other piece was that people would have to spend a lot of time creating reports to say, you know, we are creating all of this to tell you how long it's taken us to fill potholes, which first of all was time consuming. Their job is to fill potholes, not to create reports, and so it took them away from that core competency. Secondly, it introduced some possibility of not telling the truth all the time. And so we have the ability now with newer data systems to pull that data in automatically, or at least not relying on the department to do it. Our office can do that for them. It doesn't have to be really technical. We aren't building predictive models or anything like that. We're just counting, which is harder than we'd like sometimes, but we're just counting things. And so I think to your point about, yes, culture rating strategy, we tried to preemptively understand where that was. I think even still, people have pushback. There are a lot of questions about exactly what is being measured, what's reasonable to be measured. We let our departments define what those things that we're measuring are and what the reasonable timeframes are. So it wasn't us that said, hey, you need to go and fill potholes within 5 days because we think it's important. It was Public Works that said, well, we think that potholes are a key service that not delivering potholes, filling potholes are a key service that we provide. And so we think it's important to measure that, and we think it should be reasonable. It's a little bit of a stretch, but we think it should be reasonable for us to fill them within 5 days. And so that was them that said it. So then when they don't meet the goal, it's not our fault. We didn't set the goal, they did. So I think that sets us up for a good discussion with them where we say, well, you thought that this was reasonable. it isn't right now, so what can we do to get to the goal? Because you said it. Our hope is that they push it down to their staff. It's not just the commissioner. So we've done some work we'll go and sit with frontline staff so that they understand this isn't us coming to take their job. It's us trying to help them to have the resources that they need to do their jobs better. These are a lot of the ideas that we end up proposing come from them. And then lastly, I think we just have major buy-in from our mayor. A lot of the things that we're reporting on that site don't necessarily make the administration look great all the time. But I think his approach is that that doesn't matter because the goal is that we're doing better for our residents. And so we need to do better and we should own up to the problems that we have. So that's not perfect. There are plenty of times that, the data that we're pulling isn't exactly what we sort of learned that some of the things that we've looked at data-wise doesn't reflect the true nature of what's happening. The sort of obvious things that come out of our software systems that sometimes they are not pulling data in the way that we would love. And so figuring out where there are nuances in this data that we need to call out and change. But all of that comes from discussions with departments. And I think they've been generally open to those conversations. And also we have them constantly. It's not a once a quarter thing. Every week we get together and have these discussions. And also we'll bring in staff to talk about some of the new things that they're doing and then celebrate it really publicly too. We have a blog that we talk about good things that have happened. And we'll clap for people in the department head meetings when things go well. So I think we try to have it be a being really positive about things, but then also being really, really targeted and focused on the things that we need to do to get better.
In terms of culture eats strategy for lunch, one of the things that we're trying to do is change the culture a little bit. What we're oftentimes what happens is senior staff get into a room and have meetings and then dictate downward. What we're trying to do is pull everyone into a process improvement process, from the technician to the clerk at the desk to everyone, and bring everyone together into the room at the same time. What we often see in City Hall is that the business side and the IT side aren't talking to each other in any real way. That it's this needs to get done, so IT, go do it now. We're the business side. We tell you what to do, go do it. And oftentimes there's a real disconnect between the processes that need to happen and when people aren't in the same room talking, things fall by the wayside. Things that would have been caught if people were collaborating more don't get caught. So we're trying to, we're doing a lot of process mapping for these large processes like our in-rem auction, certain billing streams that have been neglected for a while. Who are the people that touch this process? So for our in-rem auction, it's the law department, it's the taxation department, it's the IT department, it's the sewer department, the water department, it's our public works department, all these things that we can foreclose on. How can we get in the room and make sure that people aren't stressed out about having to do work in rushed work because the business side waited till the last second to say, now you need to go do this. Can we map it out? Can we strategize? This needs to get done by then. This certain piece of information needs to get to the IT department 2 weeks or a month before it typically does. We hired a new CIO in March. Our fiscal year starts in July, so he was able to see the tail end of our fiscal year, and what he saw is a lot of stress from our IT department because people weren't talking. It was something as simple as our IT department needed the tax rates to calculate tax bills that needed to go out for the start of the fiscal year. And every year, our IT department complained that they get the tax rates too late. They get the tax rates too late. So we went to the person that is responsible for giving the tax rates and saying, next year, you're getting them the tax rates as soon as you know the tax rates, not a week before the tax bills are due. Something as completely simple as that. It happens when people are constantly talking, constantly trying to improve processes, and it's something that Don spoke to. I'm not super familiar with Lean, but I think what I'm doing with the new CIO is Lean, it sounds like. So you've got it in your name. McLean, MC Lean. We're starting to see a change in our IT staff. They're no longer reserved or stressed or rushing around or anxious. They're willing to come to the table now, willing to collaborate. In the past, collaboration was a bad word because it wasn't true collaboration. What we're seeing now is open communication, honest communication, getting people to speak up at meetings, and the culture is slowly reaching a tipping point where we're starting to provide value above and beyond just coming to work and clocking in, clocking out, getting the job done that was asked of me that day.
So I think I've heard, just want to make sure I'm reflecting what was mentioned here, pulling in everyone who's a stakeholder in it, especially including the people on the ground who are doing the actual work, putting data in or doing the work being recorded, and having somebody who's sitting above the IT organization who can make sure that the business and the IT personnel are on the same page. I'm sure we'll touch on this a little bit later, but Syracuse has also done some contracted projects. I'm thinking of the data science for social good, for example. And I assume that the same applies there with contractors or consultants who provide IT support. Frequent conversations was another one. And it sounds like in some cases you broke through. I'm a little curious about the spreadsheets that you discovered in Public Works and how that came about, and if it really was just out of the blue or brute force or just repetition. And finally, celebrating social wins publicly. Yep. Have I left something out that you think is important for folks to keep in mind?
Well, one of the things I'm making an honest effort right now to try to change culture as it relates to innovation. I think so many times civil servants are afraid to change, even if they think it's worthwhile. And so encouraging them to share their ideas. So many people have come up to us and said, "Oh, hey, you guys should do this." And it's like, yeah, that's a great idea. Like, why don't you do it? And we can be here to help you. This is your idea. This is a good idea. Go ahead and do that. And just really ensuring that they have the confidence and tools and resources they need to make change. And so we've been doing a series of events around this, and I do pause. They're not super data heavy, but they're making a big difference, I think. So we even just now have a series of what we call innovation lunches, where once a month we let anybody come, we buy lunch, and we work through a problem, and it takes us about 4 months to work through one problem. Most recently, we have developed new procedures for travel papers, so requesting travel. So I'm here in Albany today. I had to go through the travel paper process. It's awful, but we're making it better. And you bring all these people together who, like, they've never cared about, they've said, oh yeah, this stinks, but then they do it. And you'll ask them, well, why do we still do it this way? And they're just like, because it's always been done that way. And I hate that answer. And so trying to tell people that it's okay to do things differently. And so we bring them together. And the first month we talk about the problem. The second month we generate ideas to solve the problem. The third month, then we're developing those implementation plans. So we have all these ideas. Which ideas do we actually want to move forward? And then the fourth month, they get to present in front of the mayor. And so last month, they did this presentation for travel papers to the mayor. He gave his blessing. He said, yes, go ahead, make all these changes. So those are in the works. But my office's budget analyst was one of the people who presented on a new travel policy. And I just never thought she would be an ally. She was, she's a lovely human being, but she is like, nope, this is the way. We're always going to do it this way. And so just to see her think creatively, think outside of the box, and then get up front in front of the mayor and all of her peers and present. And budget analysts don't typically have the opportunity to do that. So you see all these people feeling empowered and taking on new roles. And it's these little changes that are starting to make a difference in culture. Similarly, this summer we had an ideas competition where we allowed any employee to submit ideas that they wanted to implement in the city. About 30 ideas came in. We were pretty excited about that for the first time. There were 5 finalists. We worked with those 5 finalists to basically develop a presentation. They had 10 minutes to present in front of a panel of judges, Shark Tank style, and we were only supposed to have 1 winner, but we ended up with 2 winners. But again, it was and about 60 people came to watch these presentations, and it was just, culturally, we're starting to move the needle, and it's a combination of these events, but then also things that Kirk talked about. So how do you engage people? How do you encourage them to engage in the dialogue and just say, you have power over your own work. If this process isn't working, like, you can change it. So I think that's like the other big cultural thing that we're doing now.
One of the other things that we did when our new CIO came on board and I moved up to the IT department, very quickly we realized that, because I worked in the mayor's office and I knew a lot of the commissioners and the deputy commissioners and the higher level managers, they immediately came to me and said, I have all these IT needs. Like, why weren't you asking the previous people that were leading the department? And there just wasn't really strong communication. So what we did is if you have IT needs, come and sit down with us in a room with our IT team, bring your support staff, and we'll work through all your issues together. And then we'll meet bi-weekly to track all the issues you brought to bear at the first meeting. And then we just have a very simple Excel spreadsheet. This is the item we talked about. This is who's responsible for it. This is what came of the last meeting. These are updated comments from the next meeting. Any new items. And that way it's not just someone shouting into the void, I need IT help in my department, and nothing ever gets done. We are holding ourselves accountable. We're holding the department accountable. This is what we agreed to do together, and we're moving toward accomplishing it together.
So I want to open it up for questions from all of you. Do any of these microphones work? Let's see if one of them.
Hello, 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 hello.
Good. That one seems to work.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna come out if you can raise your hand.
Yeah, I really have to yell at it.
Please state your name and your role.
My name's John Rodat, and what I do now is not relevant, but among other things, I used to be in charge of IT in Albany County, and I think what you folks have been talking about is great. My question is this: to what degree do you use internal data, internally generated data, internally managed data, and to what degree do you use externally generated data and and then, of course, the kicker is, and to what degree do you integrate those data sets with what results? Thank you.
Sure. Does this work? Yes. Okay. Good question. So I think maybe the most basic example, or the example that all of us have access to in terms of external data that is freely available and really, really useful, is the census. So the census produces its big report every 10 years, and they are currently in the process of planning for it. So everybody in here should make sure that their municipalities are participating in anything that they're asking. So we'll take that data, and I'm just going to take all 3 microphones and see if that works. So we'll take that data and look at different things. So I talked before about our poverty rate in Syracuse, and it's a rate that we don't like to see. It's much higher than we'd like. It's about a third of our population currently lives in poverty. It's horrible. It's also extremely broad and doesn't tell us all that much, but we can start to dig down into that and look at things, like I said before, things like connectivity that they have. Now, so that's external data. We have nothing to do with it, but we do know where all of the census tracts are. We also know all of the properties that exist within those census tracts. And so we can start to look at, okay, by census tract, where is connectivity to broadband lowest? And then how does that relate to things like vacancy in housing? And so then we can start to do some, pretty simple scatter plots, and thinking about, on one axis, we're looking at percentage of properties that are vacant, and the other axis, we can look at the percentage of connectivity, and we can see if there are trends, and if there are, then we can start to know, okay, as vacancy goes up, connectivity may go down as well, and so maybe we need to do something specific in that census tract versus another. So I think that's at the federal level where we can go. The state, we're lucky because New York State has an open data portal, so you can go and you can download a lot of data about your city that either in some way your city is provided to the state that then they sort of clean up and you can look at in a variety of ways, or there may be state agencies that are doing measurement that you can then pull to see. So I think very similar there. You can think about it at a citywide level, a neighborhood level, those kind of things. So that's publicly available private data. I think where a lot of cities are going and where we will start to move to is that there's privately held data that cities can have access to. So for instance, Uber exists and in upstate New York, and they have provided data to certain cities about where are they doing pickups and drop-offs. And so in concept, you could get access to that as well, and you could start thinking about where are these Uber trips happening most, and what does that mean in terms of business development? Maybe you know where your available properties are, and if there's all of a sudden more people getting dropped off on a certain street, does that then help you to make an argument that maybe there's some economic activity here that you didn't know otherwise? Waze, which is the navigation app that Google now owns, they also provide data to cities. You can see a lot of different things about how fast are cars going, where are there traffic jams, those kind of things. Now, all of that is hard. It's not just as easy as saying like, oh, cool, let's just overlay a couple of maps. Even creating the maps can be hard. So I think also what we try to do is go back to fundamentals and say things like, are we counting things the right way? Do we know how many vacant properties are in our city? Do we know how many vacant properties are in our city by census tract? And then if you can get that, then merging that with some of those publicly available or privately available data sets are possible, but it's certainly, all of those sort of integrate. It's hard enough to integrate data across the city. So integrating data from multiple levels of government or multiple entities can be really challenging, but can have a huge amount of potential for giving more context, because cities only collect certain certain things. You know, basically the processes that we deliver are the data that we're collecting, and so so it's important to figure out where that collaboration can happen more.
So the bulk of my work right now is liberating our internal data sets from our legacy source systems and automating them and pushing them to the open data portal for public consumption and internal consumption. We have leveraged census data. If you go to our open data portal, you'll see neighborhood level data. We mashed up the census tract level data with our neighborhood shape files and kind of made it more relatable to people. A lot of times census tract is an abstract thing. Does anyone know what census tract they live in? No. Okay, one person. But everyone knows what neighborhood they live in. So what we did was we kind of compiled the data by neighborhood level and have it out there on some interactive dashboard so you can go see at an economic level or demographics what's going on in your neighborhood to make it a little bit more relatable for people. We've also federated with the state data portal. We were lucky that we ended up procuring the same vendor that the state uses. So any of the state data is also searchable right on our open data portal. So if you search on our open data portal for a certain data set, the city may not have released it, but potentially the state's released it as well. So you're getting not only the city data search results, but state data search results. And then we're also looking at the federal government recently released a big a data set on life expectancy and rates of certain diseases. I think it's called USA LEAP, L-E-E-P. And we're going to do a similar dashboard to what we did with the census data and push that to the portal so it's easier to understand on a geospatial neighborhood level what's going on, where the rates of obesity or diabetes or lung cancer, and expose that so people know what's going on in their communities and they can start to have more informed discussions about what's going on in their neighborhood based on the data that we're presenting to them.
You made me think of a resource. I don't know if any of you have contributed to the Upstate Data Project's website, but they have it's a dataupstate.org website that's a sort of growing community of practice. Has some great stories in a blog format about combining state and local government data with, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of exactly how they match things up and dealt with issues for further reading, that might be a good resource to check out.
Thank you. Dan Heitzenreiter with Chautauqua County, and my question is a large reason for implementing these data systems is the transparency factor and the public access. And while those things are obviously great on principle, that these things should be available, I'm wondering what the public usage you've found is, because obviously if the usage is there on the public end, it's a lot easier to justify the resources to create these systems. So I don't know if you have website counts or something. Just curious what sort of trends you've seen, and then sort of a part two, did the use sort of start to happen organically, or did you have to create some like campaigns around that?
Adria can fill in wherever I don't do a good job. So I agree on usage. I think what we've found is, first of all, we don't know the right answer all the time. We try to respond. We try to make data public sort of as there are demands for it. we get our water from Skaneateles Lake, and the last couple of summers there have been blue algae outbreaks in the lake, which make it really dangerous to drink the water, which people get concerned about. And so we published the data of all the tests that were happening so that people could have free access to those results. And that very quickly became the most popular data set that people were looking at. So I think generally there's been sort of consistent use of the portal, but then if there's specific needs, people will go and look for that. Now also, this is all put out there in sort of boring spreadsheets that a lot of people don't care all that much about. So we've felt like it is important to leverage the spreadsheets and create charts or maps or just putting out numbers and counts so that people can have some context and put it sort of within a story of generally what we are focusing on. So we may talk about you know, an exciting new program, and we'll use the data from the Open Data Portal to show where a change has happened or to create a chart so that things happen. So in some cases it may be people downloading data directly. We try to create partnerships with Syracuse University or going on sort of road shows with our neighborhood groups and talking about the availability of the data, which they'll look at. But I think also it's using that information and publishing it in a way that is easily digestible for, you know, people who don't like spreadsheets. And then for the people who want to go and check us and you know, look at the data itself, that's available to them too. So they, you know, people don't have to trust that we're making that right. So I don't know offhand the specific website counts. I don't know that that's the best way to make the justification anyway. But I think it's using it as a resource and having it as sort of a backstop. Oh, sorry.
I can add to that. So we have an analytics page as part of our software package, and I think last time I looked, we were well over 100,000 page views. We launched in February, and some of our larger data sets, like the crime incidents, 311 service requests, have hundreds of downloads. So that's a great justification for our people utilizing it, yes. In terms of how we get people to engage with the portal, right after we launched the portal, we also launched a Civic Innovation Challenge, where we just kind of put it out to the public, go out and create something innovative on the back of our data, and then we partnered with AT&T and got $8,000 in prize money, and the first prize winner got $5,000. They created a nice, quick, interactive directory of like things that are areas of interest around the city, like hospitals, parks, stuff like that, and then they were going to layer that with Google translation services, so it would be really easy for refugees or new Americans to the city to go and find things that they need access to around the city, whether it's food pantries or homeless shelters or things like that. And they pulled in all this data from not only our open data portal, but other places. And one of the other winners took our fire hydrant location data and drew a 15-foot radius around all the fire hydrants in the city, and then spun up an app based off of that. That used the smartphone's GPS system. So if you were too close to the fire hydrant and the 15-foot radius around the fire hydrant, it would show you. So back up, you're going to get a parking ticket. So people are using the data interactively. I mentioned this earlier, but we're the week after Thanksgiving, we're launching a Data 101 program, which will teach active citizens how to engage and interact with the portal, and we're kind of using a train the trainer model. So we want to train them, and then we want them to go out and train other people to use the portal as well. So you know, it just increases the use of the portal and knowledge of data around the city.
Sorry, I'm Tom Gifford, incoming mayor of Scotia. Scotia has a population of 7,500, and we don't have an IT person nor yet an IT department. Do you have any suggestion on how we can leverage something like that? I mean, it's what do we do to provide data to people?
I think one of the reasons why I love coming to this conference so much is because there are towns that are 7,500 people, and it's actually really exciting to me to think about all the potential opportunity, because there's potentially less data, so it's not so overwhelming. And you could imagine like walking around every single street and collecting every single asset and, you know, figuring out where there are problems, which granted would take a lot of time, but fewer miles of road to walk potentially. So sometimes that is on the other side sort of an attractive thought process. So first of all, I think I would say there are a lot of resources to tap into in terms of just people who are excited about this information. Later on, there's Bloomberg Philanthropies has a network called What Works Cities that is right now a group of 100 cities across the country that are granted bigger than 7,500 in population, but have people who are thinking about these kind of things and are always very willing to share sort of their approaches. The second thing is, at least the way that we've approached a lot of this is extremely low cost. So our open data portal, we've paid, well, we paid $0 for. We have a portal that is through Esri, which is a mapping software. A lot of cities have that anyway. I don't know if you do, but that's a way that we've shared it. But we also don't even have to use that. Like, you can upload spreadsheets to Google Drive and make that Drive folder public, and people could go and download those spreadsheets if you wanted to share data. You don't have to spend a ton of money on the software. I'm skeptical a lot of times of relying on that, because I think there are companies that sort of understand that not all cities have a great grasp of exactly where they want to go, but they want to have some sort of presence of data and information in their policy making and want to be transparent. And so then they say, like, well, here's this option, but there are other ways to do it. Granted, not quite as pretty. You don't get some of the interactivity, but if you just want to share data, you can put it on Dropbox or on Google Drive or on your website, and people can download that, and that is fine. And so I think that's the second step of it. I would love for every city to have a chief data officer. It would be very cool. But I think also there are things like, we have done this analysis with census data that is free and available to you too. And so granted, you may not have a full-time staff person to analyze and really dig into that data, but there's probably a university that would love to partner, and you have a specific use case that we don't have and that New York City doesn't have, because you are in a certain type of city in a state that has its own challenges that you need to address, whether it's poverty or whether it's transportation or whatever. And so you don't even have to think about how do we pull this data from our own systems, because federal government or state government makes that data public. Now, there's going to be some limitation. There's always going to be more questions that you want to ask. But I think as you dig into that and find how you could do that work better, more efficiently, or where there may be people interested in funding things, funding the research, or providing people to help do that research, that is there. What I've found is that expressing the need and giving the use case for whatever the problem is that you're trying to tackle, or the suite of problems that you're trying to tackle, there's someone who wants to analyze data to help you figure that out. It just may take some creativity in how you reach out to them. But there are plenty of excellent universities and colleges statewide, but there are also, you can't take any of our students from Syracuse because they all have to work on our projects, but there are places like Center for Technology and Government here, and all other places. We've worked with NYU has a Center for Urban Science and something, and so we worked with them on a project. And so you don't even have to just think about it locally. There are universities and even maybe just people in your community that if you reach out and say, we need some help here, I think that is an approach before you go and hire a full IT staff and a chief data officer and all of those kind of things. Does that help? Okay. I don't know, do you have anything to add? Okay. Yes.
I will also say we have a workshop this afternoon on data for little or no cost that is partly addressed towards pulling better data out of your organization and getting it to folks who need it. And you had a...
I have one question. We will be probably wrapping up just after after I ask the question, and then we're going to be moving on to one other thing. But when you were talking about this, and I know that there are a lot of us out here that don't have, offices of innovation or CIOs, and I'm assuming that this is a general fund expense, in your budgets. And so are there opportunities to then justify the existence of the department as far as like revenues that come in or savings? Like do you do that budgetarily? So that's my question.
Adria should talk about this specifically because she has it. I will also just offer that y'all can call me or email me, and I'm happy to help on things to the degree that I can. So.
So one of the things that we try to do every time when we go into budget season is we have what we call an I-Team CV, so an innovation team CV, which lists all of our projects, and then we also list out any cost savings that comes from us. So one of the things that we're trying to do is quantify and measure the innovations that we do. So we are rolling out electronic permits, for example, for HVAC and for electric applications, and we are anticipating that, we were able to do the math, and so the average salary plus benefits for an employee is $35 an hour, and on average we spend 15 minutes on each one of these applications that comes in because we do them by hand right now, and we have 1,500 of those a year. So we're able to see how much staff time goes into it now, and then we'll be able to also quantify, the staff time after. And then, so it doesn't always look like that. Sometimes we're trying to figure out how to make our infrastructure departments work together and do dig once projects instead of, DPW repaving and then a water main breaking, a few weeks later and then cutting open the road. So there are different ways to quantify. I think that's really important. It's important for us to show our own business proposition and ensure that they keep us around. So I would just, any changes, even again, like the organizing your office, it's like not a sexy thing, but we actually use this format that we call team, right? Yeah, team. And the T stands for, and so if you just think of it going down a page, T is for time, so the amount of staff time that goes into it. E is for errors that happen, so travel paper thing, there's a lot of errors that happen in that, so that increases the time. The A is the amount, and then the M is the money. And basically, if you can fill in all of these lines in a before situation and then an after intervention situation, hopefully there'll be a delta somewhere, even if the time or the money didn't change, maybe the errors decreased. And so that's kind of the format that we now utilize to get to the impact. And we try to do that with every project.
All right. Oh. Yep. All right. So
we'll stick around. You all can come and ask us stuff.
Okay. Thank you. Can we have a round of applause for...